Welcome back to my channel. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Loren Crawford, and I work with midlife professionals to help them create more authentic and fulfilling careers and personal lives through mental fitness. And as we go through this topic today, I want you to be thinking about it, yes, in terms of your profession and how you're operating in that milieu. Also would love for you to be thinking about this in terms of your personal life. So it can be applied both ways. As we move through October, I've been having some interesting conversations with clients about year-end assessments. And one thing becomes particularly clear about this, and that's that a lot of the focus is on the external measurements. So that's what we're going to explore here in a moment. As I was going through my midlife, I struggled with not being able to achieve the things that I wanted. What I realized that the assessments that I was using for myself were limited to visible outcomes, and they were completely missing some of the deeper patterns that were driving these results. So today, I'm sharing a three-dimensional assessment framework that I think goes far beyond the conventional metrics to reveal what can actually shape your professional experience, and again, personal, and the results therein. Let's dive in looking at the problem with conventional year-end reviews and how we can change things. So most of these reviews focus exclusively on what was achieved, the goals met, the projects completed, the revenues generated. And that's all well and good. And these metrics do matter, but they don't tell the complete story. By midlife, we are well established in certain patterns and certain behaviors and certain habits. And this certainly includes our daily routines. So we get trapped thinking that we are this body and that we're effectively going through life and going through our professional lives on autoplay, frankly, most of the time. So what's missing from the conventional reviews are some of the invisible drivers that we don't actually connect with, especially when we're in autopilot. What do I mean by that? Well, the mental, the emotional, and the energetic patterns that actually determine a lot of the results, they're not even factored into most of the metrics we're looking at. So let me share a specific example from my own career where I was hitting all those external metrics, but completely missed what was happening beneath the surface. So I worked in an organization that was politically driven. It was a mid-sized organization, not huge. Part of the work that I did was very much self-directed. There weren't a lot of metrics used to gauge how well I was doing vis-a-vis the organizational needs. Therein was a shortfall. It was difficult for me, therefore, to have my own goals and my own metrics to measure my success. And how this played out for me was it started to create a lot of cynicism and frustration around my moving forward. So even though there may have been larger goals for the organization, they didn't ripple down to me at the level that I was operating. And that affected my input, that affected my performance, that affected me on a wellness level. So we want to make sure that wherever we're at in an organization, whether we're in a leadership role or whether we're in a supporting role, that we have that guidance, that the metrics that we need to be able to feel that sense of fulfillment and that engagement in whatever it is that we're doing. So let's move into this a little bit further. Think about your own year. Have you been successful according to the external metrics that are applied, but perhaps at a cost to your well-being or to your authenticity? Or maybe you've grown tremendously in ways that aren't captured in those metrics, and they don't even show up in your performance review. So there's lots of aspects here where the individual isn't showing up in the metrics. We're going to dive into this three-dimensional assessment framework now. And for each dimension, I'm going to provide you with some detailed explanation, examples perhaps, and reflection questions, which I really hope you'll engage in. And at the end, we'll look at some practical application as well. Dimension 1 is limiting patterns. When we're in midlife angst, this is a call for us to wake up from the sleepwalking that perhaps we're doing. This first dimension of our assessment framework examines the patterns keeping us moving in autopilot. In positive intelligence, we can identify this as saboteurs, these automatic mental patterns that maybe once helped us to survive and to pursue our goals, but now limit our potential. For example, the hyperachiever drives us to equate achievement with self-worth. The controller creates the illusion that by micromanaging, we'll have better outcomes. The stickler gets in the way by thinking that everything is perfect, then we're going to have a better outcome. The avoider tends to avoid difficult and complicated discussions and conversations or decisions. Those are a few examples. So pattern assessment questions that may be helpful for you to consider are the following. Where did your limiting pattern show up most predictably last year? Which professional situations consistently triggered your strongest saboteur reactions? How did these patterns influence your decision-making, relationship building, and overall performance? What was the cost of these patterns to your well-being, relationships, and results? I'm going to invite you to take some time to review these questions and jot down your responses. You can pause the video and join me when you're done. When working with one of my clients who had achieved a lot of success earlier in his life and then underwent some personal challenges, including some health challenges, and when back in the workforce found himself really struggling to identify that energy, that vibrancy that he previously had. His own inner saboteurs were holding him back from achieving the potential that he clearly had because he'd proven it previously, and found himself in jobs that weren't challenging him sufficiently to rise to the occasion. And so what ended up happening is he became more and more steeped in this notion of not being who he could potentially be. And this is a pattern that can happen when we're living under control of the saboteurs and not finding the expansiveness of our sage being. And we'll explore that a little bit more as we go. When we're stuck in positions that hold us back, this impacts our overall well-being, our relationships, and how we perform in all aspects of our lives. So now that you've reflected on those questions and maybe jotted down a few points, let's take a few more moments to inventory your 3 most persistent limiting patterns from the year. What triggered them? And how did they manifest? And what impact did they have? Again, you can pause the video. Great. Now that you've begun this work of creating this inventory for yourself, we want to move into dimension 2, which is wisdom access. So like me, you may believe that the universe clearly has something in mind for each of us when we come into this world. The second dimension here, wisdom access, examines your connection to this deeper knowing. Now, this isn't mystical stuff. It's really the practical ability to access your integrated intelligence beyond reactive thinking. It's where creativity, intuition, and discernment live. I like to call this the higher mind. In positive intelligence, we call this the sage. This is the part of you that can respond rather than react, that can see possibilities rather than problems, to look at any situation as a gift, something that we can learn from, grow from, and explore. So here are some wisdom assessment questions you may want to ponder. When did you sense that deeper knowing was guiding you this year? In which situations did you trust your inner wisdom over external expectations? You trusted your gut. How quickly could you shift from reaction to response in challenging moments? So moving from that knee-jerk to being a little bit more calm and thoughtful in the response. What enabled those moments of clarity and what blocked them? Early in this year, I was working with a marketing coach to help me move forward in my coaching business. And while he had a proven methodology that clearly had worked for a number of people, as I embarked on it, it became clear after a number of weeks that it really wasn't aligning with me as a person, the deeper entity, who I am, and really how I want to show up in my business every day. And so I used that opportunity, that self-awareness, to have a conversation with him and to step away from that program. And that was really, really important for me to do, because alignment of that deeper self, that deeper awareness, that gut knowing is really part of these metrics and part of this understanding. By looking at this contrast between saboteur and sage responses in perhaps professional situations that may be challenging, we can see how these unfold. In the avoider scenario, you may be avoiding assessing Q4 metrics because your gut tells you that some goals simply weren't reached. That's the avoider saboteur. From the sage perspective, it's important then to take the first step that's required to make sure that that spreadsheet is completed as a first step, without the analysis, without the full picture. One step to move forward. The stickler saboteur might be reworking your Q4 report multiple times to ensure you've made it just perfect, spending countless hours going over and over. On the sage side, we would use the 20-80 principle, where 20% focus is on the accuracy of the data, which is really the most important aspect. That needs to be right, that needs to be perfect. But 80% of the focus can be on the presentation being good enough. It does not need to be perfect. The hyperachiever saboteur might have you volunteering to take on yet another project that no one else wants to do, even though you're already overextended. The sage response to that is detach from the outcomes you're seeking, the accolades and the recognition you're seeking from taking on yet another project. Rather, focus on celebrating what you're already working on and accomplishing, and be satisfied with that. Now let's do a practical step here again. Let's step back into reflection mode and identify 3 moments this year where you accessed your deeper wisdom. Think about what conditions allowed that to happen, and how can you create more of those conditions moving forward. We're moving into dimension 3 now, which is energy awareness. Your vital intelligence speaks through your energy. This 3rd dimension examines where your life force gets expanded and where it gets contracted. Energy isn't just about having enough coffee, and it's not just like the energy in the light bulb above you. It's your body's intelligent framework system that aligns with your authentic self. When your mind, body, and deeper wisdom align perfectly, you experience both high performance and inner coherence. This is when you're living and functioning in ease and flow. That's the state we all want to achieve. So here are a few energy assessment questions for you to ponder. And again, you can take some time to jot your responses down at the end of these. Which relationships, projects, or environments consistently expanded your capacity? Where did you feel contracted and resistance in your professional life? And again, you can look at your personal life as well. When did you experience both high performance and inner peace simultaneously? What energy patterns depleted you most consistently? Take some time to jot those down. Clients who use mental fitness understand is how to start to live with greater self-awareness that transcends into the organizations where we work. So being able to recognize when unconscious patterns of behavior are holding us hostage, being able to recognize when we're being held back by limiting beliefs and contracting energy, and learning how to trust that deeper intelligence, that intuition, that part of us that's beyond the cerebral, analytic, critical thinking left brain. When we have this more integrated approach to how we show up and how we be professionally and in our personal lives, this is a powerful impact on overall organizational achievements and individual achievements. Now we want to look at another practical application. The magic happens when you integrate these 3 dimensions, seeing how your limiting patterns affect your energy, how energy access impacts your wisdom, and how wisdom breaks patterns. Here's a step-by-step process to conduct your own 3-dimensional year-end assessment. And there will be a handout at the end for you to work through. So I'm just going to walk you through the steps here. So we start with a blank timeline of your year, month to month. We want to identify key events, achievements, and challenges along the timeline. Then for each significant moment, assess all 3 dimensions. So which patterns were operating? Were you accessing wisdom or caught in the reaction mode? Was your energy expanding or contracting at each of these points? Once you have that done, you can look at recurring patterns and connections between the dimensions. And then identify 3 to 5 of the most significant insights about how you operate. This will be very, very helpful. And I recognize this is a different way of doing an assessment, and this is why it's important to give yourself some time to explore it. So you have the download in the description below. Go ahead and use that to do this work. And once you've completed your assessment, you'll have powerful insights to guide your development plan for the next year. That's why this is so important. Here's how you can translate these insights into action. By identifying 1 to 2 limiting patterns that most constrain your impact. Wow, powerful. By designing specific mental fitness practices to intercept your patterns. And you may not be clear on what that is now. I'll speak to that in a moment. You can create environmental conditions that naturally support wisdom access. You can schedule regular energy check-ins to maintain that awareness that we talked about. And you can find accountability to sustain your practices. How are you going to remain accountable? The positive intelligence framework provides a systematic approach to building this integrated awareness, to making moments of alignment your default, rather than them being occasional experiences and haphazard. So we have a process here to work with in positive intelligence. They'll be really, really helpful for you. Let's explore why this matters now. Why is this imperative? As is always the case, when the student is ready, the teacher appears. The challenging circumstances of this year, 2025, have been precisely the teachers that many of us needed. The world is going crazy. And midlife, too, is the perfect opportunity to wake up to a deeper sense of purpose. The external achievements that once defined success and made us feel good no longer bring that fulfillment. Leaders who master these 3 dimensions don't just perform better, they create entirely different possibilities for themselves and their organizations. This is how we shift the culture. And it's not just in your organizations, it's in your home life, your family life, all relationships. What I find time and time again with clients is as they're doing this work, they find an elevated sense of purpose, an elevated sense of being. And not only that, but there's a great ripple effect in terms of the overall performance of the organizations where they're working. And if they're not overseeing the whole organization, within the sections within which they have authority. It's really powerful stuff. And we can compare in this visual the traditional mode of leadership versus this more integrated mode that I'm encouraging you to explore and adopt. So these are fairly familiar aspects. And just notice how the traditional side feels contracted and tight, even when you read it. And the integrated leadership aspects feel more expansive, more integrated, more whole. So the positive intelligence framework provides a practical pathway to this awakening. And it's not just about managing thoughts. Let's be really clear about that. It's about transforming your relationship with yourself and with your life. Let's move into a little bit of a recap here of what we've covered. We've explored how a truly valuable year-end assessment examines 3 dimensions: your limiting patterns, your access to wisdom, and your energy awareness. This deeper assessment isn't about judging yourself. Please don't judge yourself. It's about seeing clearly so that you can make conscious choices about who you become next. It's all about the becoming. We're constantly becoming if we're conscious and awake. I'd love to hear which dimension resonates most strongly with you. You can share that in your comments, and which aspect of your professional experience needs the most attention right now as well. So as I mentioned, I've created a downloadable. It's the 3-dimensional assessment worksheet to guide you through this process. If you weren't able to fully do it while going through the video today, you'll find the link in the description below. For those wanting to go deeper into this work, and perhaps you're recognizing how valuable it can be, I'll be sharing more elements on this approach in the coming weeks as I prepare for my January 2026 Positive Intelligence cohort. This program is specifically designed for midlife professionals who are seeking to break free from old patterns and to step into their next authentic chapter. And that authentic chapter does play out in the workplace, in your professional life, but also in your personal life. So what pattern do you most want to transform as you move forward in 2026? Just take a moment to reflect on that. What pattern do you most want to transform? And maybe take a moment to set that intention before we close this video. I want to thank you so much for engaging with me in this approach to professional development. If this resonated, subscribe, like, comment, and share this video with others who may benefit. Until next time, this is Loren, wishing you both performance and peace. Talk to you soon.